The moon landing in 1969 is considered one of humanity's greatest achievements. Neil Armstrong's famous words, "That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind," marked a turning point in history. Yet, despite the overwhelming evidence that humans landed on the moon, there remains a group of people who believe the entire event was a hoax, staged by the United States government. The moon landing hoax theory has persisted for decades, and continues to spark heated debates even today. This theory, the origins of the moon landing hoax theory, can be traced back to the 1970s, not long after the Apollo 11 mission took place. Initially, it was dismissed as fringe speculation. However, over time, it gained momentum, fueled by books, documentaries, and conspiracy theorists. The theory suggests that the United States government, in the midst of the Cold War, staged the moon landing to demonstrate its technological superiority over the Soviet Union. In doing so, it would win the ideological battle of the E. For many, the notion that the US government would fake such a monumental event seems far-fetched, especially considering the sheer scale of the operation involved. The Apollo 11 mission required the coordination of thousands of people and the construction of highly complex technology. And yet, some remain convinced that the evidence presented by the government was fabricated, and that the moon landing was shot in a film studio, perhaps with the help of Hollywood director Stanley Kubrick. They point to. Over the years, the moon landing hoax theory has evolved, with new evidence being presented in various forms. Some claim that the American flag planted by Armstrong and Aldrin appeared to flutter in the vacuum of space, something that is impossible due to the lack of atmosphere. Others argue that there are inconsistencies in the lighting and shadows in the photographs taken on the moon's surface. Some even assert that the American government intentionally deceived the public in order to gain political. Despite the widespread belief in the authenticity of the moon landing, the persistence of the hoax theory is a testament to the power of conspiracy. This theory is not just a footnote in history, it is an ongoing subject of debate, with people continuing to seek out new angles and proof that the landing was staged. As we dive deeper into this topic, we will examine the claims made by the hoax proponents, as well as the scientific explanations that debunk these theories. The question remains, was the space race was a significant event in the Cold War, a competition between the United States and the Soviet Union to achieve major milestones in space exploration. This intense rivalry culminated in the 1969 Apollo 11 moon landing, a moment that showcased the technological and scientific advancements of the United States. However, for conspiracy theorists, the political context surrounding the space race provides fertile ground for the claim that the moon landing was a fabricated event. At the height of the Cold War, the US and the Soviet Union were engaged in a fierce ideological, political, and military struggle. The race to space became a symbolic battleground, with each nation striving to demonstrate its technological and political superiority. The Soviet Union's early successes, such as launching the first artificial satellite, Sputnik, in 1957, and sending the first human, Yuri Gagarin, into space in 1961, placed immense pressure on the United States to catch up. In response to these Soviet achievements, the US government made space exploration a priority. In 1961, President John F. Kennedy set the ambitious goal of landing an American on the moon before the end of the decade. The objective was to demonstrate the United States' technological prowess and win the Cold War space race. This drive for superiority fueled the development of NASA's Apollo program, which eventually led to the historic Apollo 11 mission. However, for some, the intense political and ideological stakes of the space race provide the motivation for the belief that the moon landing was staged. According to proponents of the hoax theory, the United States, in its effort to prove its dominance, may have faked the moon landing to avoid the embarrassment of falling behind in the race. They argue that the US government, desperate to demonstrate technological superiority, might have fabricated the moon landing as a propaganda tool. The pressure to succeed in the space race was immense. The United States had already suffered a number of setbacks, such as the failed attempts at sending humans into space, and the Soviet Union was ahead in terms of space achievements. The moon landing, many argue, was not just a scientific goal but also a political and strategic necessity. For those who believe the moon landing was a hoax, The backdrop of Cold War tensions and the intense need for political victory make the possibility of a faked landing seem plausible. Moreover, the Cold War environment, where secrecy and misinformation were commonplace, adds fuel to the fire of conspiracy theories. The idea that the US government would have used its power to deceive the public is not out of line with the broader context of Cold War propaganda. The belief that the US government might have staged the moon landing to claim victory in the space race and bolster its global image is an argument that some find convincing. Despite these theories, the reality of the space race and the achievements of the Apollo mission stand as a testament to human ingenuity and international collaboration. The debate continues, however, as the political and historical context of the moon landing fuels both skepticism and admiration. The question of whether the moon landing was a hoax remains at the heart of ongoing discussions, with the space race serving as a reminder of the high stakes and global tensions of the era. The Apollo 11 mission, which landed the first humans on the moon, is often regarded as one of the most significant achievements in the history of space exploration. On July 20, 1969, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin made history by becoming the first humans to walk on the lunar surface. Their historic journey was televised for the entire world to witness. The mission was a culmination of years of planning, technological advancements, and intense dedication by NASA and the thousands of individuals involved. Apollo 11's primary goal was to land humans on the moon and safely return them to Earth. The mission was part of the United States' effort to win the space race and fulfill President John F. Kennedy's ambitious goal of landing a man on the moon by the end of the 1960s. The spacecraft for the mission consisted of 3 parts: the Command Module, CM, the Service Module, SM, and the Lunar Module, LM. The Command Module housed astronauts Michael Collins, who remained in orbit around the moon, while Armstrong. The journey to the moon began on July 16, 1969, with the launch of Saturn V, the largest and most powerful rocket ever built. The rocket carried the Apollo 11 spacecraft out of Earth's atmosphere and on a trajectory toward the moon. After 4 days in space, the spacecraft entered lunar orbit, and Armstrong and Aldrin transferred to the lunar module, named Eagle. As the spacecraft descended toward the moon's surface, Armstrong famously took control of the descent, guiding the lunar module past boulders A. Once on the lunar surface, Armstrong and Aldrin spent approximately 2 hours outside the spacecraft, conducting experiments, taking photographs, and collecting rock and soil samples. Their activities were broadcast live to millions of people on Earth, making the event a global spectacle. Armstrong's first steps on the moon were immortalized with the famous words, "That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind," signaling the historic achievement. While the moon landing was widely celebrated, some conspiracy theorists believe that the entire event was staged. They argue that the mission's success, given the technological limitations of the time, raises suspicions about its authenticity. Some claim that the moon landing was staged to boost American morale during a time of political unrest and war, or to assert U.S. superiority over the Soviet Union. Others allege that NASA falsified the data and footage, claiming that it was all filmed on Earth, PO. Despite the persistence of these conspiracy theories, the evidence supporting the authenticity of the Apollo 11 mission is overwhelming. The lunar rocks brought back to Earth have been studied extensively and match no known rocks on Earth. Additionally, photographs, videos, and data from the mission have been independently verified by multiple space agencies and experts. The scientific community has consistently reaffirmed the legitimacy of the Apollo 11 mission, and the astronauts' accomplishments are S. The Apollo 11 mission was not just about landing on the moon. It was a remarkable achievement in terms of technology, human exploration, and international cooperation. It marked the beginning of a new era of space exploration and solidified the United States' position as a leader in space science. While conspiracy theories continue to circulate, the accomplishments of Apollo 11 remain a testament to human ingenuity and determination. The origins of the moon landing hoax theory can be traced back to the early 1970s, not long after the historic Apollo 11 mission. The idea that the United States government might have faked the moon landing began circulating as early as 1974, when a man named Bill Kaysing published a book titled "We Never Went to the Moon: America's $30 Billion Swindle." This book is widely regarded as one of the first major contributions to the moon landing hoax conspiracy theory. Kaysing, who was a former technical writer for Rocketdyne, a company that worked on the engines for the Saturn V rocket, claimed that the United States did not have the technological capabilities to land a man on the moon and bring him back safely. He argued that the entire Apollo program, including the moon landings, was an elaborate hoax staged by NASA. Kaysing's book was filled with various allegations, such as the assertion that the U.S. government had fabricated photographs and videos of the moon landing. While Kaysing's book did not gain widespread attention at first, it laid the groundwork for the growing skepticism surrounding the moon landings. Over the next few years, more and more conspiracy theorists began to echo his claims, and the idea of the moon landing hoax began to gain traction. Several documentaries and articles published in the 1970s and 1980s further fueled the conspiracy, offering new evidence and arguments to support the hoax theory. In particular, the rise of the internet in the 1990s played a significant role in the spread of the moon landing hoax theory. With the advent of websites and online forums, conspiracy theorists were able to connect with like-minded individuals, share their ideas, and promote their claims to a wider audience. As the internet became more accessible, videos, articles, and books promoting the idea of the hoax spread rapidly, and the theory gained even more momentum. One of the main arguments presented by hoax proponents is that the United States government staged the moon landing in order to win the space race against the Soviet Union. During the Cold War, the U.S. was under immense pressure to demonstrate its technological and political superiority. The moon landing, they argue, was a politically motivated event designed to demonstrate American dominance in space exploration. To some, the idea of the U.S. government fabricating the moon landing to win the space race. The rise of the moon landing hoax theory also coincided with a growing distrust of the U.S. government and its institutions. The Vietnam War, the Watergate scandal, and the general atmosphere of political turmoil in the 1960s and 1970s led many Americans to question the credibility of their government. In this climate of suspicion, the moon landing hoax theory found a receptive audience among those who were already inclined to believe in government conspiracies. Over time, the theory has evolved and taken on new dimensions. Some conspiracy theorists now claim that the U.S. government did land astronauts on the moon, but that the footage and photographs were faked to cover up a more sinister truth, such as the discovery of extraterrestrial life on the moon or the existence of a secret lunar base. While these claims are even more outlandish, they still contribute to the ongoing narrative of the moon landing hoax. One of the central elements of the moon landing hoax theory is the key arguments presented by conspiracy theorists, who claim that the United States faked the Apollo 11 moon landing. These arguments have been widely circulated over the years and are often the foundation for the belief that the moon landing was staged. Some of the most prominent arguments presented by hoax proponents include discrepancies in photographs, anomalies in the footage, and technical issues with the mission itself. One of the first arguments made by conspiracy theorists is the claim that the photographs taken during the Apollo 11 mission are not authentic. They argue that the images taken on the moon show various anomalies that suggest they were staged, such as the appearance of shadows and lighting that appear unnatural. According to the hoax theory, the shadows in the photographs fall in different directions, despite the fact that the sun is supposed to be the only light source. Some proponents of the hoax theory. Another argument often presented by conspiracy theorists revolves around the American flag that was planted on the moon's surface by Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin. According to the hoax theory, the flag appears to be waving in the footage, despite the fact that there is no wind or atmosphere on the moon. Proponents of the hoax theory argue that the flag's movement suggests that the footage was filmed on Earth, where wind is present. They claim that the flag's motion was created artificially, either through. In addition to the photographic and flag-related anomalies, conspiracy theorists often point to the technical limitations of the time as evidence that the moon landing was faked. They argue that in 1969, the United States did not possess the technology to land astronauts on the moon and safely return them to Earth. Some hoax proponents claim that the Apollo spacecraft was not capable of surviving the extreme conditions of space travel, such as cosmic radiation and the vacuum of space. They argue that the hoax proponents also question the authenticity of the footage taken on the moon's surface. They argue that the way the astronauts move and interact with their surroundings does not match what would be expected in the moon's low gravity. For example, the way Armstrong and Aldrin hop around and the way their movements are filmed has been interpreted as evidence that the footage was filmed in a low-gravity environment, such as on Earth in a special effects studio. These claims have been used to suggest that, despite these arguments, there is overwhelming evidence to support the authenticity of the Apollo 11 moon landing. The photographs and footage taken during the mission have been analyzed by experts and found to be consistent with the conditions of space travel. The American flag's motion can be explained by the way it was planted in the lunar soil and the absence of air resistance. Additionally, the technical achievements of the Apollo program, including the successful landing of astronauts on the moon. One of the most commonly cited arguments by conspiracy theorists who claim that the moon landing was faked is the supposed absence of stars in the photographs taken during the Apollo missions. According to the hoax theory, the fact that no stars are visible in any of the photographs taken by astronauts on the moon suggests that the entire mission was staged. However, this argument fails to take into account the physical and photographic realities of space and the moon's environment. The first thing to consider when analyzing the issue of stars in the photographs is the nature of photographic exposure. The photographs taken on the moon were taken with relatively short exposure times, necessary due to the brightness of the lunar surface and the sun's intense light. The Apollo missions took place during the lunar daytime, meaning that the sun was shining directly on the moon's surface. As a result, the contrast between the bright lunar surface and the dark sky was too great for stars to be visible. On Earth, we are used to seeing stars at night because the sky is relatively dark. On the moon, however, the sun's brightness is much stronger, making it almost impossible for cameras to capture the faint light of distant stars. The bright sunlight reflecting off the lunar surface also causes the camera's sensor to adjust its exposure, making it impossible to capture the much dimmer light from stars in the background. This is a basic principle of photography, which applies both on Earth and in space. In fact, the absence of stars in the Apollo photographs is not only expected but also consistent with the known conditions on the moon. The camera settings used by the astronauts were specifically chosen to capture the details of the lunar surface and their activities, but they were not set to capture distant stars. The short exposure times and the bright sunlight made it impossible to photograph stars at the same time as the bright lunar surface. This is a simple matter of contrast and exposure, not a sign of a staged mission. Another important point to consider is the perspective and angle of the photographs taken by the Apollo astronauts. Many of the photos were taken close to the lunar surface, where the sunlight was intensely bright, further reducing the visibility of stars. The sky on the moon is not the same as the night sky on Earth, and even if stars were present, they would likely have been too dim to be captured by the cameras under these conditions. Furthermore, the absence of stars in the Apollo photos has been explained and confirmed by experts in the fields of astronomy, photography, and space exploration. NASA and independent experts have consistently stated that the lack of stars is entirely consistent with the known conditions of the moon and the photographic techniques used at the time. The claim that stars should have been visible in the photographs is based on a misunderstanding of the basic principles of photography and space science. Another frequently cited argument by conspiracy theorists who claim that the moon landing was faked is the apparent movement of the American flag planted by the astronauts on the lunar surface. According to the hoax theory, the flag appears to be waving or fluttering in the photographs and videos taken by Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin. Since the moon lacks an atmosphere, conspiracy theorists argue that the flag should not have moved and that its motion is proof that the entire mission was staged, possibly. In reality, the apparent movement of the flag can be explained by the unique conditions on the moon and the way the flag was set up by the astronauts. The key factor to consider is that the flag was not actually waving in the conventional sense. On Earth, when a flag flutters, it does so because of wind, which is caused by the movement of air molecules. However, the moon lacks an atmosphere, so there is no wind or air to cause the flag to flutter in the way we typically see flags move on Earth. The flag's apparent movement occurred when it was first planted in the lunar soil. The astronauts twisted and pushed the flagpole into the surface of the moon, which caused the flag to ripple and move temporarily. This initial motion was not due to wind, but rather due to the physical manipulation of the flag during the planting process. Once the astronauts stopped moving the flagpole, the flag settled and became taut, with no further movement. This initial ripple effect, captured on film, was mistaken by some as evidence of wind. Another important factor is the way the flag was designed. The Apollo 11 mission used a special flag that was fitted with a horizontal bar at the top to keep it unfurled. This bar allowed the flag to hang in a straight line, even though there was no wind to keep it flying. The flag's fabric was made of synthetic materials that were more rigid than typical flags, so when the astronauts twisted the pole or touched the flag, the fabric moved more easily and held the shape of the disturbance. The hoax theory is based on the assumption that the flag should have remained perfectly still in the absence of wind. However, the flag's movement can be explained through basic physics and the mechanics of how it was handled. When the astronauts planted the flag, they caused it to move momentarily, but once they stopped interacting with it, the flag remained stationary. The apparent waving effect was not caused by wind, but by the physical actions of the astronauts and the rigidity of the flag. Experts in the fields of physics and space exploration have consistently debunked the claim that the flag's movement is evidence of a faked moon landing. The phenomenon is entirely consistent with the conditions on the moon and the way the flag was designed and deployed. The absence of wind on the moon and the way the astronauts interacted with the flag explain why it appeared to move temporarily. The flag's behavior is simply a result of the physical interactions with it, not a sign of a staged event. One of the most frequently cited arguments by conspiracy theorists who claim the moon landing was faked is the apparent inconsistency in the shadows and lighting in the photographs taken during the Apollo 11 mission. According to the hoax theory, the way shadows fall and the lighting in the photos seem unnatural, suggesting that the entire event was staged on Earth in a film studio. These theories argue that the sun, being the only light source on the moon, should have produced more consistent and natural. The first issue that conspiracy theorists point to is the way shadows in the Apollo photographs fall in different directions. In several photos, the shadows appear to diverge, as if they are being cast by multiple light sources. This seems contradictory because, in the moon's environment, the sun is the only light source, and the shadows should logically fall in a single direction. The hoax theorists suggest that this inconsistency is proof that the photographs were staged, with artificial lighting used. However, the explanation for this phenomenon lies in the unique conditions on the moon's surface and the way light behaves in a low-gravity environment. The moon's surface is uneven, with hills, craters, and ridges that can distort the way shadows are cast. When the sun's light hits these irregular surfaces, the shadows can appear to fall in different directions due to the contours of the lunar landscape. This is similar to how shadows behave on Earth when they fall across uneven terrain, such as mountain. Additionally, the lack of an atmosphere on the moon also contributes to the unusual appearance of shadows. On Earth, the atmosphere scatters sunlight, causing shadows to be softer and less defined. On the moon, however, the absence of an atmosphere means that sunlight travels directly to the surface without scattering, resulting in much sharper, more defined shadows. This can make the shadows appear more dramatic and focused, contributing to the perception that they are inconsistent or unnatural. Another factor to consider is the wide-angle lenses used by the Apollo astronauts to capture photographs. These lenses, designed to capture a broader field of view, can sometimes distort the way shadows appear in the image. The distortion can cause the shadows to appear uneven, even though they are being cast by a single light source. In addition, the position of the astronauts relative to the camera and the sun can create a range of shadow effects that may appear unusual to the untrained eye but are act. Lastly, it's important to recognize that the photographs taken by the Apollo astronauts were subjected to extensive analysis by experts in photography, physics, and space science. Many of these experts have confirmed that the shadows and lighting in the photos are entirely consistent with the conditions of the moon's surface. The appearance of multiple shadow directions can be attributed to the moon's uneven terrain, while the sharpness of the shadows is a result of the lack of an atmosphere. The lighten. Another argument frequently presented by conspiracy theorists who claim that the moon landing was faked is the apparent lack of clear landing marks or footprints left by the astronauts during their time on the lunar surface. According to the hoax theory, the absence of visible marks such as deep footprints or engine blast impressions suggests that the moon landing never took place, and that the entire event was staged. However, the explanation for the absence of deep footprints and obvious landing marks lies in the unique conditions of the Moon's environment. Unlike Earth, the Moon lacks an atmosphere, weather, and wind to erode or cover up the surface. This means that the footprints and marks left by the astronauts should, in theory, remain intact for an incredibly long time. The Moon's surface is composed of a fine, powdery substance called regolith, which is formed by the constant bombardment of meteoroids over billions of years. While regolith is soft, it is not nearly as soft as Earth's soil, and therefore the astronauts' footsteps did not sink deeply into the surface. Additionally, the lack of moisture and weather on the Moon means that there is no natural erosion or shifting of the surface. On Earth, wet soil or sand can easily form deep footprints due to the moisture content, and wind or rain can erode marks over time. The Moon's dry, stable conditions mean that the footprints left behind by the astronauts were relatively shallow but still visible. Moreover, the Apollo lunar module's engine did not create the kind of deep, lasting impressions that might be expected from a large spacecraft's descent. The engine blast was designed to be gentle in order to ensure a soft landing, and the engine's force was directed downward in a controlled manner. In fact, the lunar photographs and videos taken by the Apollo astronauts clearly show that the footprints and landing marks were visible when the astronauts first stepped onto the Moon. The shallow footprints, while not deep, are still observable in photographs taken by the astronauts. Some photos even show the lunar module's descent engine marks, which were visible for a short period after the landing but eventually settled back into the regolith. The argument that the Moon landing was faked because of the supposed lack of footprints and landing marks overlooks the simple science of how the Moon's surface behaves under pressure. The absence of deep impressions is entirely consistent with the Moon's surface composition, the lack of atmospheric interference, and the gentle landing process. Another argument presented by conspiracy theorists who claim that the Moon landing was faked revolves around the authenticity of the footage taken during the Apollo 11 mission. According to the hoax theory, the video footage of the astronauts walking on the Moon, conducting experiments, and setting up equipment was fabricated or staged in a studio. Some argue that the footage does not appear to be consistent with the conditions of the Moon, such as the way the astronauts move and interact with the. One of the key criticisms of the Moon landing footage is the way the astronauts seem to move while walking on the lunar surface. Conspiracy theorists claim that the way Armstrong and Aldrin move, especially the way they hop or bounce around, looks unnatural and more like something filmed in a low-gravity environment on Earth rather than on the Moon. The theory suggests that this strange movement could only be explained if the footage was taken in a controlled environment, such as a studio with artificial G. However, this criticism overlooks the actual physics of movement on the Moon. The Moon has only about 1/6 of the Earth's gravity, which means that objects and people weigh significantly less. As a result, astronauts on the Moon were able to jump higher and move more slowly than they would on Earth, but their movements were not completely unnatural. The hopping behavior observed in the footage is a result of the lower gravity on the Moon, which allowed the astronauts to take larger, slower steps that. Additionally, the way the astronauts appear in the footage is consistent with the limited equipment they were using. The bulky spacesuits they wore, which were designed to protect them from the harsh conditions of space, made movement more difficult. The spacesuits had to be pressurized and had rigid joints, making it challenging for the astronauts to move as freely as they might have on Earth. The slow, deliberate movements in the footage are a result of these factors, rather than evidence that the footage walked. Another argument made by conspiracy theorists is the quality and clarity of the video footage. Some critics argue that the quality of the footage taken on the Moon is too clear and sharp to have been filmed in such a remote and harsh environment. They claim that, given the technology of the time, the video should have been grainy, blurry, or otherwise difficult to view. However, the clarity of the video footage can be explained by the specialized equipment used by NASA during the Apollo missions. The Apollo 11 mission used a special television camera that was developed specifically for use in space. The camera was designed to operate in the extreme conditions of space and had to be able to transmit high-quality images back to Earth, even though it was transmitting from the Moon's surface. The technology used for the transmission was state-of-the-art for the time, and the camera's ability to capture clear images in low light and high-contrast environments was an impressive technological achievement. Despite the claims made by conspiracy theorists, the evidence supporting the authenticity of the moon landing footage is overwhelming. The footage has been extensively analyzed by experts in the fields of video production, physics, and space science, and has been shown to be entirely consistent with the conditions on the moon. The way the astronauts move, the clarity of the video, and the behavior of the equipment all match the known physics of the moon and the technology available during the 1960s. One of the key arguments used by conspiracy theorists to support the claim that the moon landing was faked is the assumption that the Soviet Union would have exposed the hoax if it had been staged. During the Cold War, the United States and the Soviet Union were fierce rivals, competing for dominance in space exploration, military power, and ideological influence. Given the intense rivalry between the two nations, conspiracy theorists argue that the Soviet Union would have had every incentive to expose a faked. The logic behind this argument is simple. If the United States had faked the moon landing, the Soviet Union, which was also deeply invested in the space race, would have uncovered the deception and exposed it to the world. The Soviet Union had the capability to track the Apollo missions and monitor the United States space activities. If the moon landing had been faked, the Soviet Union would have been in a prime position to reveal the truth, thereby undermining the United States' global position. However, this argument overlooks several important factors. First, the Soviet Union's own space program was not without its own challenges and setbacks. While the Soviet Union had achieved significant milestones in space exploration, such as launching the first satellite, Sputnik, and sending the first human, Yuri Gagarin, into space, their space program was not necessarily better equipped than the United States program in terms of surveillance and technology. The Soviets had no way of directly observing th. Furthermore, the Soviet Union's response to the moon landing was not one of disbelief or exposure, but rather of acknowledgement. The Soviet government, led by Premier Leonid Brezhnev, issued a formal statement congratulating the United States for the success of Apollo 11. While the Soviet Union did not explicitly endorse the U.S. achievement, they refrained from claiming that the moon landing was a hoax, which would have been the most logical response if they had concrete evidence of a faked mission. The ABC. In fact, some historians and space experts argue that the Soviet Union's silence on the matter was actually a sign of respect for the achievement, as well as a recognition of the geopolitical importance of the moon landing. The Soviets were well aware that exposing a hoax would have been a major diplomatic blunder, potentially damaging their credibility and their relationship with other nations. The Soviet Union may have seen the U.S. moon landing as a victory for human progress, even if it was denied. Another reason for the Soviet Union's lack of public challenge to the moon landing lies in the international political environment of the time. While the Cold War rivalry was intense, the two superpowers were also engaged in diplomacy and negotiation in other areas, such as arms control and scientific collaboration. The Soviet Union may have chosen not to engage in a public confrontation over the moon landing to avoid escalating tensions further, as doing so could have undermined their position in the. Moreover, even after the Apollo 11 mission, the Soviet Union continued to pursue its own lunar exploration efforts. The Soviet Union sent several successful lunar missions, including robotic spacecraft and a probe that returned lunar soil samples to Earth. This demonstrated that the Soviets were not content with simply exposing a hoax but were actively trying to achieve their own goals in lunar exploration. The fact that the Soviet Union did not claim that the moon landing was faked further suggests th. In recent years, modern technological advancements have provided additional evidence to support the authenticity of the Apollo 11 moon landing. With the advent of more sophisticated tools, including high-resolution satellite imagery and advanced space exploration technologies, scientists and experts have been able to verify and confirm the locations of the Apollo landing sites. These technological developments have played a crucial role in debunking conspiracy theories and providing irrefutable proof. One of the key pieces of evidence that has emerged in recent years comes from high-resolution satellite images taken by lunar orbiters. For example, NASA's Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, LRO, which was launched in 2009, has captured detailed images of the Apollo landing sites. These images show the remnants of the Apollo lunar modules, the paths left by the astronauts' movements, and even the discarded equipment left behind during the missions. The LRO has been able to capture the exact locations of In addition to the lunar images captured by satellites, researchers have also analyzed the retroreflectors that were placed on the lunar surface during the Apollo missions. These retroreflectors, which were designed to reflect laser beams sent from Earth, are still in use today. Scientists can point lasers at these retroreflectors, and by measuring the time it takes for the light to return, they can determine the exact distance between the Earth and the Moon. This ongoing experiment, known as Lunar Laser R, the presence of these retroreflectors is a critical piece of evidence that supports the authenticity of the Apollo missions. If the moon landing had been faked, it would have been impossible for the United States to place these scientific instruments on the moon. The retroreflectors are still functional, and their continued use in scientific research serves as a tangible reminder of the successful Apollo missions. Another important piece of evidence supporting the moon landing is the collection of lunar rock samples that were brought back to Earth during the Apollo missions. These rock samples have been extensively studied by scientists around the world, and their composition is unlike any known rocks found on Earth. The unique isotopic signatures, mineral compositions, and lack of water in the lunar rocks provide strong evidence that they were indeed collected from the moon and not manufactured on Earth. The authenticity of these lunar samples has been confirmed by independent laboratories and scientists from different countries. The moon rocks have been shared with scientists around the world, and their unique characteristics continue to provide valuable insights into the geological history of the moon. The scientific community's consensus is that the Apollo moon landings were real and that the evidence provided by these rock samples is irrefutable. Finally, the technological advancements that have taken place since the Apollo missions have made it even more difficult for conspiracy theorists to maintain their claims. Modern space exploration missions, including those conducted by private companies like SpaceX, have only further validated the achievements of the Apollo program. The success of these missions, along with the evidence provided by the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, retroreflectors, and lunar rock samples, leaves little room for doubt that Despite overwhelming evidence supporting the authenticity of the moon landing, the theory that the Apollo 11 mission was a hoax continues to persist. Over the decades, the hoax theory has gained a considerable following, with new adherents often being drawn in by books, documentaries, and online platforms that promote the idea that the moon landing was staged. This persistence of the theory can be attributed to a variety of factors, including psychological biases, distrust of authority, and the rise of. One reason for the persistence of the hoax theory is the role of cognitive biases in shaping how people perceive evidence. Confirmation bias, for example, is a tendency for individuals to seek out information that confirms their pre-existing beliefs while dismissing information that contradicts them. For those who believe in the moon landing hoax, any piece of evidence that appears to support the theory is accepted, while overwhelming scientific proof to the contrary is often ignored or dismissed. Another psychological factor that contributes to the persistence of the hoax theory is the desire for certainty and control. People who are drawn to conspiracy theories may feel a sense of empowerment in believing that they possess knowledge that the general public does not. By embracing the idea that the moon landing was faked, they may feel that they have uncovered a hidden truth that has been deliberately suppressed by the authorities. This sense of superiority can be a powerful motivator for individuals. The distrust of authority, especially government institutions, also plays a significant role in the persistence of the moon landing hoax theory. Many people have a deep-seated skepticism of government agencies, and this distrust has only intensified in recent years due to various political scandals, misinformation, and controversial government actions. For some individuals, the idea that the U.S. government would stage the moon landing fits into a broader narrative of government deception and cover-ups. In the digital age, the internet has played a significant role in spreading and amplifying the moon landing hoax theory. The rise of social media platforms, online forums, and YouTube channels dedicated to conspiracy theories has created an environment where hoax proponents can easily find like-minded individuals who share their beliefs. Online communities can reinforce these ideas through groupthink and echo chambers, where alternative viewpoints are often suppressed or ignored. As a result, the persistence of the hoax theory can also be explained by the emotional appeal it has for some people. Conspiracy theories, by their nature, tend to evoke strong emotions such as fear, anger, and mistrust. These emotions can cloud rational judgment and make it more difficult for individuals to accept factual evidence. For some, the idea that the moon landing was a hoax is more emotionally satisfying than the reality of a successful space mission. The idea of uncovering a great conspiracy can be an attra. Despite the persistence of the moon landing hoax theory, the scientific community has consistently reaffirmed the authenticity of the Apollo missions. The evidence supporting the reality of the moon landing, including photographs, videos, lunar samples, and retroreflectors, is irrefutable. As technology continues to advance and new evidence is discovered, the credibility of the moon landing remains stronger than ever. However, the enduring nature of the hoax theory serves as a reminder of the power of pay. After examining the numerous arguments put forward by conspiracy theorists, as well as the overwhelming evidence that supports the authenticity of the Apollo 11 moon landing, it is clear that the moon landing was not a hoax. The theories put forth by hoax proponents, while intriguing to some, failed to hold up against the weight of scientific evidence, technological achievements, and historical context. The moon landing remains one of humanity's greatest achievements, and the idea that it was staged. The scientific evidence for the authenticity of the moon landing is irrefutable. The photographs and videos taken during the Apollo missions have been extensively analyzed by experts in the fields of photography, physics, and space science. The conditions of the moon, including its lack of atmosphere and uneven terrain, are fully consistent with the appearance of shadows, the behavior of the flag, and the way the astronauts moved on its surface. The authenticity of the footage, the lunar samples b. Additionally, modern technologies such as satellite imagery, lunar laser retroreflectors, and the continued study of lunar rock samples have provided further evidence that the Apollo missions were genuine. The Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter has captured clear images of the Apollo landing sites, showing the remains of the lunar modules and the paths left by the astronauts. The retroreflectors placed on the moon by the Apollo astronauts continue to be used in experiments to measure the distance between Earth and the fact that the Soviet Union, a nation engaged in an intense space race with the United States during the Cold War, did not dispute the authenticity of the moon landing further strengthens the case for its legitimacy. The Soviets had the means to track the Apollo missions and had every incentive to expose a hoax if one existed. Instead, they congratulated the United States on its achievement, demonstrating that there was no hidden conspiracy to uncover. Despite this overwhelming evidence, the persistence of the moon landing hoax theory serves as a reminder of the power of conspiracy thinking. The theory has endured for decades, fueled by cognitive biases, distrust of authority, and the rise of online communities that amplify these beliefs. However, as technology advances and more evidence is gathered, it becomes increasingly clear that the moon landing was real, and the conspiracy theories surrounding it are baseless. The moon landing represents a monumental achievement in human history. It marked the first time that humans set foot on another celestial body, and it demonstrated the extraordinary capabilities of human ingenuity and scientific progress. The Apollo 11 mission paved the way for future space exploration, inspiring generations of scientists, engineers, and explorers to reach for the stars. The evidence overwhelmingly supports the fact that the moon landing was genuine, and the hoax theory can be debunked by T. The Apollo missions, culminating in the successful landing of Apollo 11 on the moon in 1969, remain a testament to human achievement, scientific innovation, and the spirit of exploration. Despite the persistent conspiracy theories that claim the moon landing was faked, the overwhelming body of evidence confirms that the Apollo program was a remarkable success. The scientific advancements and technological feats achieved during the Apollo missions have had a lasting impact on space exploration and the Apollo program was not just about landing on the moon. It was about pushing the boundaries of human knowledge and demonstrating what humanity could accomplish through collaboration, dedication, and innovation. The Apollo missions marked a new era in space exploration, laying the groundwork for future missions to the Moon, Mars, and beyond. The successful landing of Apollo 11 on the Moon proved that humans could venture into space, explore new worlds, and make groundbreaking discoveries. The evidence supporting the authenticity of the moon landing is undeniable. From the photographs and videos taken by the astronauts to the lunar rock samples brought back to Earth, the scientific evidence overwhelmingly supports the reality of the Apollo missions. Additionally, the continued use of the retroreflectors placed on the Moon and the detailed images captured by lunar orbiters provide further proof that the Apollo missions were genuine. While conspiracy theories about the Moon landing may continue to circulate, they cannot overshadow the incredible achievements of the Apollo program. The success of the Apollo 11 mission inspired a generation of scientists, engineers, and explorers, sparking interest in space exploration and advancing humanity's understanding of the universe. The Apollo missions not only advanced our knowledge of space but also demonstrated the power of human ingenuity and determination. The legacy of the Apollo program lives on in the many achievements of modern space exploration. NASA's continued exploration of the Moon, Mars, and beyond, as well as the growing involvement of private companies in space missions, is a direct result of the inspiration and technological advances that the Apollo program provided. The lessons learned from Apollo's successes and challenges continue to shape the future of space exploration. In conclusion, the Moon landing was a monumental achievement that continues to inspire awe and wonder. The scientific evidence, the technological achievements, and the historical context all point to the reality of the Apollo missions. The persistence of the Moon landing hoax theory cannot change the facts. The legacy of the Apollo program is a lasting reminder of what humanity can achieve when we work together to explore the unknown.